The first person to spit the word traitor at me was the child whose life I had just saved. He was only 7 years old. His little hands were still covered in my blood. He did not understand why soldiers were chaining my wrists. He did not understand why the pack was screaming for my execution. He only knew I had pulled him into my arms when the poisoned arrow came flying through the palace gardens. He remembered the sound it made when it struck me instead. He remembered my hands pressing against his ears so he would not hear me cry. He remembered me smiling at him, even as my blood soaked the grass beneath us. But children remembered truths that adults taught themselves to forget. The Alpha King stood 20 feet away. His son was alive because of me. His Luna was pointing at me. And the entire pack believed her. She planned the attack, Queen Ceres declared. Who else could have known exactly where the prince would be? Thousands of wolves began shouting, "Traitor! Human witch! Execute her!" I searched only one face, the Alpha King's. He looked at me. Our eyes met. For one impossible heartbeat, I thought he would speak. I thought he would remember the promise he had made years ago. If you ever save someone I love, Valen, you will always have my protection. Instead, he lowered his eyes and said nothing. That silence condemned me more completely than any sentence ever could. By sunset, the woman who had saved the Alpha Kingdom's only heir was standing beneath the execution platform. The crowd cheered. The executioner sharpened his blade. The queen smiled. Only one person was crying, the little prince, because he was the only one who knew something the rest of the kingdom did not. He had seen the assassin's face. And it was not mine. Welcome to MoonNoir. If you have ever watched truth lose to fear, only to rise stronger than ever, this story is for you. Subscribe and like if this is your first time here. Let us begin. Long before they called me a traitor, they called me something far worse. Human. Not as a description, as an insult. In Blackstone Territory, humans were tolerated only when they were useful. Merchants crossed the borders. Blacksmiths repaired weapons. Farmers traded grain. When business ended, they went home. No human remained after sunset, except me. My name is Valen Ashwood, and I lived where no sensible person ever would. A little stone cottage at the edge of Graypine Forest, too close to rogue territory for wolves, too deep inside alpha lands for humans. Exactly where I wanted to be, because injured creatures rarely cared about borders. Every morning began the same way. Before sunrise, I filled 2 woven baskets, one with herbs, the other with medicines I made myself. The forest gave everything if you knew where to look. Moonleaf soothed fever. Silver root slowed poison. Frost moss stopped bleeding better than any cloth. My grandmother had taught me every plant before she died. The forest always tells the truth, she used to say. People do not. I discovered how right she was when I was 12. A wounded wolf had crawled into our vegetable garden. Its side had been torn open. One eye swollen shut. My father reached for his hunting rifle. My grandmother stopped him. "That is someone's child," she whispered. "It is wearing a wolf's body today." She stitched the wound herself. 3 days later, the wolf disappeared without leaving a single footprint. A week afterward, someone left a basket of fresh meat outside our door. No note, no name, just gratitude. That was the first time I understood something. Mercy traveled farther than fear. Years passed. My parents died during a winter fever. Grandmother followed the spring after. The cottage became mine. So did every lesson they had ever taught me. I never married, never left, never stopped healing whoever arrived at my door. Human, wolf, rogue, traveler. It made no difference. Pain sounded the same in every language. By 26 people had begun whispering about the healer in Graypine. Some called me blessed, others called me dangerous. The wolves preferred another name, the human witch. I found it amusing. If gathering herbs and sewing wounds together made me a witch, then perhaps the world needed more witches. Not everyone feared me. Children rarely did. Neither did animals. Foxes wandered through my garden whenever they pleased. Birds nested beneath my roof every spring. Even wolves sometimes slept outside my cottage after I treated them. They always disappeared before dawn, as if embarrassed to have trusted human hands. One rainy afternoon, I was grinding herbs when someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Not desperate, not cautious. Deliberate. I opened the door. An enormous grey wolf stood there. His shoulder was bleeding heavily. An iron trap still clung to his leg. He did not growl, did not bare his teeth. He simply looked at me, waiting. I sighed. "You are going to ruin my floor." The wolf blinked, then limped inside. Removing the trap took nearly 20 minutes. He never bit me. Not once. When I finished wrapping the wound, he rested his massive head against my shoulder, only for a moment. A silent thank you, before disappearing into the rain. I watched him vanish between the trees. Something about him felt familiar, like I had seen those pale silver eyes before. 3 weeks later, I learned why. Royal soldiers arrived at my cottage. 12 riders, black armor, silver wolf crests. The Alpha King's personal guard. The captain dismounted. "You are Valen Ashwood." "I am." "You will come with us." "I do not take orders very well." His jaw tightened. "This is not a request." It usually is not. The soldiers exchanged uncertain looks. Most people became frightened when royal guards appeared. I offered them tea. The captain exhaled sharply. "The Alpha King's son is dying." Everything inside me went still. What happened? No one knows. The palace healers. They have failed. I looked toward the forest. The herbs hanging from my porch. The little cottage that had been my entire world. Then back at the captain. "If I save him," I asked quietly, "will your people remember I am human?" The captain did not answer. Some questions already carried their own answer. I closed the cottage door behind me, not knowing that before another sunrise, the kingdom would call me its greatest hero. And before the week ended, the same kingdom would demand my death. The journey to Blackstone Palace took most of the night. No one spoke unless it was necessary. The royal guards rode as if death itself was chasing them. Perhaps it was. I sat inside a covered carriage with my medicine chest on my lap, listening to the wheels grind against the frozen road. The captain finally broke the silence. "The prince collapsed 3 days ago. Fever," he nodded. "Then came the convulsions." "Anyone else sick?" "No." I looked out through the small window. "That is not an illness. What is it?" I met his eyes. "It is either poison or someone wants it to look like one." The captain's expression hardened. He said nothing more. Blackstone Palace rose from the mountain like it had been carved from the cliff itself. Tall black towers, silver banners, hundreds of wolves moving through its courtyards. The gates opened before us. Servants stared as I climbed from the carriage. Some whispered. Others openly frowned. A human. She is all they found. Have we become that desperate? I ignored them. Sick people did not have time for pride. The prince's chambers smelled wrong, not of sickness, of flowers, too many flowers, sweet enough to hide something beneath them. I stopped just inside the doorway. Every instinct my grandmother had ever taught me screamed the same warning. Someone was hiding a scent. On the bed lay a tiny boy, far too pale, his breathing shallow, his lips faintly blue. Prince Lucien, only 7 years old. He looked smaller than I imagined. Children always did when they were close to death. One elderly physician turned from the bedside. His name was Elder Physician Dravith. He had served the royal family for 20 years. He looked at me with the expression of someone who had just been told their expertise was insufficient and had not yet decided how to feel about it. "We have already tried every known remedy," he said. "Then why is he getting worse?" His silence answered for him. A deep voice filled the room. "If you cannot save him, say so now." I turned. Alpha King Kalor. He was taller than every man around him. Broad shoulders, dark silver hair, eyes the color of a winter storm. He wore no crown. He did not need one. Grief had stripped every royal mask from his face. For one brief moment, he was not a king. He was simply a frightened father. "I will not promise miracles," I said, "but I will not lie to you either." He stepped aside. "The room is yours." The first thing I did shocked everyone. I opened every window. Cold mountain air rushed inside. Physician Dravith protested immediately. "You are freezing the prince." "No," I replied calmly. "I am removing whatever someone is trying to hide." The sweet scent disappeared almost instantly. Beneath it, I found another smell. Bitter almonds. Almost gone. Almost. My heart sank. Moonshade, one of the rarest poisons in the Northern Territories. Slow, almost impossible to detect after several days. Deadly to wolf blood. I leaned over Lucien. His tiny pulse fluttered beneath my fingers. Weak, but still fighting. "He was not poisoned today," I said. "He has been poisoned little by little for weeks." Silence. Every physician stared at me. Dravith shook his head. "Impossible. I have examined the prince daily for 3 weeks. If moonshade had been administered, I would have detected it." I picked up the prince's silver drinking cup. A faint white residue clung to the inside. I dipped one finger into it, touched it to a strip of willow bark from my medicine pouch. The bark turned black. Gasps filled the room. Dravith stared at the cup. Something moved across his face. Not guilt, professional humiliation. The specific expression of a man who had been looking at the same cup for 3 weeks and had not seen what a human healer found in 30 seconds. "It was not impossible," I said. "It was overlooked." Then Queen Ceres entered. She moved quickly, not with the practiced elegance I had expected, with the urgency of a mother who had just been told her child was worse than anyone had admitted. She went straight to Lucien's bedside. She took his small hand in both of hers. She did not look at me. She looked only at him. When she finally turned, her eyes were wet. Not performed. Genuinely wet. "Can you save him?" she said. Her voice was not the voice of a queen managing a situation. It was the voice of someone asking the only question that mattered. "I can try," I said. She nodded once. Then she stepped back. She gave me the room. She did not watch over my shoulder. She did not interfere. She simply trusted me with her son. I noted all of it, filed it away, and began to work. For 6 straight hours I worked, not with palace medicine, with herbs, steam, needles, cold water, and patience. The poison fought back. Twice, Lucien stopped breathing. Twice, we pulled him back. The third time, I thought we had lost him. Then his tiny fingers tightened around mine. A whisper barely louder than the wind. "It hurts." Relief swept through the room. I smiled. "That is good." He frowned weakly. "How is hurting good?" "Because dead people do not complain." For the first time in days, the little prince smiled. Even the king laughed. Just once. It sounded like something he had not done in years. By sunrise, Lucien was sitting upright, eating broth, color returning to his face. Queen Ceres sat beside him. She held his hand. She looked at me across the bed. "Thank you," she said. 2 words. Simple, genuine, the kind of gratitude that did not need ornamentation. I nodded. The king approached me quietly. "I owe you more than I can repay. You owe me nothing. You saved my son. I did my job." "No," he said, looking toward Lucien. "You saved my world." He reached into his coat. He withdrew a small silver seal bearing the royal wolf crest. "This grants you royal protection within Blackstone Territory," he said. "Anyone who touches you or your medicine chest answers to me personally." He placed it in my hands. I looked at it, then at him. "I hope you mean that," I said. He looked back at me steadily. "I do. I filed that away too." Prince Lucien recovered faster than anyone expected. By the 3rd morning he was walking again. By the 5th he was running through the palace corridors, as though death had never brushed against him. I packed my medicine chest before sunrise on the 6th day. I had no interest in remaining inside a palace. Palaces complicated people. Forests rarely did. I had just fastened the last leather strap when someone knocked softly. 3 careful taps. I opened the door. Prince Lucien stood there, his blonde hair still slightly messy from sleep. He held a small wooden wolf in one hand. "You did not say goodbye." His voice was quiet, almost accusing. I smiled. "I thought you were asleep." I woke up. He looked at the medicine chest. "You are leaving. I have patients waiting." His shoulders fell. "But you promised you would teach me how to make that bitter tea." "I promised, if you were strong enough." "I am strong now." He flexed his tiny arm proudly. I laughed. "I can see that." For the first time since arriving at the palace, I forgot I was surrounded by royalty. I knelt so we were eye level. "Listen carefully." He nodded. "The tea is not what made you better." It was not. "No, what did?" "You decided to keep fighting." He frowned. "I do not understand." "You will someday." Children rarely understood courage while they were living it. Adults rarely recognized it afterward. "I brought you something." He held out the little wooden wolf. I carved it. I accepted it carefully. The carving was crooked. One ear was too big. Its tail leaned to one side. It was perfect. I have never received a finer gift. His face lit up. "Really? Really?" He hesitated. Then he wrapped his arms around my waist. The hug lasted only a few seconds, long enough to surprise us both, long enough for someone standing in the hallway to see it. Queen Ceres. She stood in the corridor watching her son hug a human healer. I expected the cold calculation I had learned to watch for in palace corridors. Instead, she smiled. Not the smile of someone performing warmth, the smile of a mother watching her child heal. She caught my eye. "He has not hugged anyone since before the illness," she said quietly. "Not even me." She looked at Lucien. "Whatever you did in that room, you gave him something the physicians could not." She did not name it. She did not need to. We both knew what it was. The knowledge that someone had chosen to stay when leaving would have been considerably easier. She nodded once. Then she walked away. I watched her go, and I found that I could not fit her into the categories I had been building. Outside the palace courtyard buzzed with activity. Captain Ronan walked beside me. Neither of us spoke until we reached the outer gates. He finally cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. For what? When I came to your cottage, I treated you like a prisoner. You treated me like someone who did not have time to argue. He smiled faintly. You still came. A child was dying. He nodded. Not everyone would have. I looked toward the palace towers. I did not do it for a king. I know. He studied me for a long moment. Be careful on the road. I always am. No. His voice dropped lower. Be careful, because not everyone is happy the prince survived. The words settled heavily between us. Before I could ask what he meant, the great palace bell began ringing. Once, twice, 3 times. An emergency signal. Soldiers immediately started running. Captain Ronan turned sharply. What happened? A terrified servant sprinted across the courtyard. The prince. Everyone froze. What about the prince? He is gone. Within seconds, the palace descended into chaos. My stomach tightened. Children did not simply disappear from heavily guarded palaces, not unless someone wanted them to. Captain Ronan looked at me. You should leave. I do not think I can. He frowned. What do you mean? I looked toward the forest beyond the palace walls, toward Graypine. If I were 7 years old and frightened, I would run toward the only place that ever felt safe. Realization struck him instantly. Your cottage. Snow had begun falling before noon, heavy, silent, the kind that erased footprints within minutes. I rode ahead of the royal search party, not because my horse was faster, because I knew Graypine Forest better than anyone alive. Captain Ronan caught up beside me. If we lose the tracks, we will not. You sound certain. I taught Lucien how to walk through snow. He frowned. When? The day before I left. The memory made me smile. Lucien had insisted fresh snow looked untouched because the forest was lonely. I had told him every creature left a signature. A rabbit's prints zigzagged. A fox walked with purpose. A deer hesitated before open ground. And people, he had looked up with wide blue eyes. What do people leave? Choices, I had said. He had not understood then. I hoped one day he would. There. I pointed toward a narrow path. Tiny footprints, half covered already. Too small for an adult. Too uneven for a hunter. Lucien. But something stopped me. I climbed down from my horse, knelt beside the prince, touched the snow, then something else. A second trail, almost invisible, much larger, following. Never overtaking, always keeping the same distance. Someone had been stalking him. We are not alone, I said. Captain Ronan drew his sword. You saw something. No, I saw someone patient. The captain's face darkened. Hunters tracked prey. Assassins watched victims. Only one kind of man followed a child without calling his name. The deeper we rode, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no squirrels. Even the wind seemed unwilling to move. Animals always noticed danger before people did. My grandmother had taught me that too. When the forest held its breath, so should you. We found Lucien's scarf hanging from a broken branch. Blue wool. Still warm. Then I saw it. Blood. Only a few drops. Tiny. Bright against the snow. A mile farther the trail ended at the frozen river. Captain Ronan cursed. It stretched across the valley like polished glass. Beautiful. Deadly. The prince's footprints crossed onto it. So did the larger ones. Then nothing. Spread out. The soldiers obeyed. I did not move. Something was not right. The river was too quiet. Then very faintly, I heard it. 3 soft taps. Not from the forest. From beneath my boots. I froze. Nobody move, I whispered. Every soldier stopped. The tapping came again. We all looked down. The ice beneath us was not solid. It was hollow. Someone was underneath. I dropped to my knees, pressed my ear against the frozen surface. A tiny voice, barely audible. Valen. My heart nearly stopped. He fell through. Where? There. A section of ice had frozen over again after breaking. It was a trap. Before anyone could stop me, I crawled across the ice. Slowly, spreading my weight. Every crack echoed through the valley. Lucien's frightened sobs grew louder. I am here, I said. Do not move. I cannot. It is all right. I am cold. I know. His crying became quieter. Too quiet. The ice gave way beneath my hands. Freezing water exploded upward. I plunged my arm through. Nothing. Too deep. I reached farther. My shoulder screamed. Then small fingers. Weak. Slipping. I have got you. Lucien tried to answer. Only a cough came out. I pulled with everything I had. Strong hands grabbed my coat. The soldiers anchored themselves with ropes. Together, inch by inch, we dragged Lucien from the freezing water. His tiny body was limp. His lips nearly white. I wrapped him inside my cloak immediately. Stay with me. His eyes fluttered. I knew you would come, he whispered. Tears stung my eyes. So did I. Captain Ronan exhaled heavily. We need to get him back. Not yet. I looked across the frozen river. Something moved among the trees. A hooded figure, watching, just for a heartbeat. Then disappearing into the forest. He had not come to rescue the prince. He had come to make certain no one else did. By the time the soldiers reached the opposite bank, the stranger was gone. Only hoofprints remained. One horse, riding back toward Blackstone Palace, not away from it, toward it. Captain Ronan stared at the tracks. His face slowly lost its color. He is not hiding outside the kingdom. No, I said, he is riding home. And for the first time, both of us understood the truth. The greatest danger to the Alpha King's son was not waiting in the forest. It was waiting inside the palace walls. By the time we returned to Blackstone Palace, night had already swallowed the mountains. Prince Lucien slept in my arms beneath 3 heavy blankets. His tiny body still trembled from the frozen river. But he was alive. The palace gates opened before us. Instead of relief, I found soldiers, not welcoming us, waiting. A path opened through the guards. Queen Ceres stepped forward. She looked at Lucien sleeping against my shoulder. Her face crumpled. Not with calculation, with relief so complete, it was almost painful to watch. She reached for him. The little prince stirred. Without opening his eyes, he buried his face deeper against my shoulder. His fingers tightened around my cloak. A tiny whisper escaped him. No. The courtyard became strangely quiet. Everyone heard it. Queen Ceres went very still. Something crossed her face. Not cold calculation, something rawer than that. The expression of a woman watching her child turn away from her, towards someone else. She stepped back, quietly. She let Captain Ronan take Lucien from me. She did not fight it. She simply walked beside them into the palace, without looking back at me. The Alpha King arrived moments later. The moment he saw Lucien breathing, his shoulders finally relaxed. He crossed the courtyard in 3 long strides. "My son." Captain Ronan lowered his head. "The prince is safe." Kaylor brushed damp hair from Lucien's forehead. Then his eyes found mine. "You found him." "We both did." Captain Ronan shook his head. "No, Your Majesty. The healer found the trail. The healer broke the ice. The healer pulled the prince from the river. If she had arrived 5 minutes later, he did not finish." Kaylor looked at me. "I owe you twice now." I smiled faintly. "I hope there will not be a third." Then a scream shattered the courtyard. Lucien's body convulsed violently in Captain Ronan's arms. I ran. "Lay him down." I dropped beside the child. Checked his pulse. Nothing. I smelled his breath. Bitter almonds. Again. Fresh. Someone had poisoned him again. I grabbed the prince's lips, forced his mouth open. A tiny crystal rested beneath his tongue, almost invisible. I reached for it. Before my fingers touched it, a voice screamed behind me. "Stop her." Hands grabbed my shoulders. I was thrown backward. The crystal disappeared, crushed beneath someone's boot. "What are you doing?" I shouted. "He is dying." Queen Ceres pointed directly at me, her face white with horror, or an excellent imitation of it. She tried to force something into his mouth. The courtyard fell silent. Captain Ronan stared. "That is not what happened." But the queen continued. "I saw it, so did the servants." Several frightened maids nodded immediately. The Alpha King looked between us. "What is happening?" "I removed poison," I said. Queen Ceres gasped. "Convenient. How strange that poison appears every time the human healer touches my son." The words spread through the crowd like fire. Poison. Human. Traitor. I finally understood. The poison. The forest. The hidden rider. Every road led here. Not to kill Lucien. To place me beside him whenever death came close. Someone was building a story. One where I became the villain. The Alpha King spoke quietly. "Valen, did you poison my son?" I met his eyes. If I wanted him dead, I would have left him beneath the ice. The courtyard became perfectly still. Even Kaylor knew that was true. Captain Ronan nodded firmly. "Your Majesty, she is telling the truth." Then Physician Draveth stepped forward. He held a small vial. He knelt before the king. "We found this in the healer's medicine chest," he said. His voice was steady, practiced. The voice of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "There are traces of moonshade inside." The king looked at me. "It belongs to the healer." "No, it does not. It was found beside her medicine chest." I had not even unpacked my medicine chest, but I looked at Draveth, at the steady, practiced voice, at the man who had been present at every poisoning, who had examined Lucien daily for 3 weeks without detecting moonshade, who had pushed back hardest against every method I used, who had the most professional motive to want my methods discredited. And something shifted in my understanding. Not the queen, the physician, the person everyone trusted because he had served the royal family for 20 years, the person nobody suspected because suspicion required motive. And his motive was standing in front of everyone. Me. The first stone struck my shoulder. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Traitor." Another voice answered, "Human witch." A third, "Execute her." I looked only at one person, the Alpha King. Waiting, hoping, for him to remember, for him to speak, for him to stop them. His jaw tightened, his fists closed. Then he reached into his coat. He withdrew the royal protection seal he had placed in my hands 2 days earlier. He looked at it for a long moment. Something moved across his face that I had not seen before. The expression of a man choosing the manageable answer over the right one. "Until the investigation concludes," he said quietly, "royal protection is suspended." He placed the seal on the table beside him, not in his pocket, on the table, in full view of the courtyard, so that every wolf could see it, so that every wolf could understand what the removal meant. Then he raised one hand. "Take her to the palace prison." His voice almost broke. Iron shackles closed around my wrists. As the guards led me away, I looked back once. The seal sat on the table where he had placed it, a small silver thing, in full view of a courtyard full of wolves who now knew there was nothing between them and me. Prince Lucien had regained consciousness. Weakly through the sea of shouting wolves, he reached one trembling hand toward me. "Volin." No one heard him, except me. The dungeon beneath Blackstone Palace had no windows. Only stone, cold, wet, silent stone. The guards removed the chains from my wrists only after locking the iron door behind me. One of them avoided looking into my eyes. The younger one. He could not have been older than 20. He muttered something as he turned to leave. So quiet I almost missed it. "You should have run." I sat on the narrow wooden bench. If I had run, everyone would believe I was guilty. He stopped, did not turn around. Then he left. I did not know his name. I did not know then that I would remember him for the rest of my life. I sat in the dark for a long time. The wooden wolf Lucien had carved was still in my pocket. I had not noticed until now. I took it out, held it in both hands, and for the first time since walking into Blackstone Palace, I stopped moving forward. I simply sat, and the doubt arrived. Not about my innocence, about my presence. Maybe if I had left when I was supposed to. The morning after Lucien recovered, when my medicine chest was packed and Captain Ronan was walking me to the gate. If I had simply kept walking, maybe none of this would have happened. A dying child in a palace I was never meant to enter. A kingdom that did not trust humans. A queen who had thanked me genuinely. A king who had placed a seal of protection in my hands. And now this. A dungeon, chains, a crowd shouting for my death. Maybe my grandmother had been wrong. Maybe some forests were better left unwalked. Maybe mercy did not always travel as far as she believed. I sat with those thoughts for a long time, not because I believed them, because they were honest, and I had always believed in honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. Then I looked at the wooden wolf in my hands. One ear, too big, its tail leaning to one side, carved by a 7-year-old boy who had spent 3 days between living and dying, and who had used the first strength returning to his hands to make something for me, not for a Luna, not for a physician, for the woman who had stayed. I heard his voice in my memory. "I knew you would come." The doubt dissolved, not because I resolved it intellectually, because the answer had been in my pocket the whole time. I was not in this dungeon because I had made a mistake. I was in this dungeon because someone needed me to be, and what I did with that was still my choice to make. Hours passed. Then footsteps echoed through the corridor. Not several people. One. The heavy door creaked open. Alpha King Kalor entered alone. No guard. No Captain Ronan. Simply the king. He looked exhausted in a way that went beyond tiredness. The exhaustion of someone carrying something they had not expected to carry. He closed the door behind him. Then he said the thing he had come to say. I received a message 2 hours ago. I looked at him. From whom? I do not know. It came through a channel I cannot trace. He held my gaze. The message said that if I release you, the northern territories will withdraw their grain supply before winter. 10,000 wolves in the outer settlements will starve before the first thaw. The dungeon was very quiet. If I execute you, the supply continues. I sat with that for a long moment. Not with fear, with the clarity of someone who has just understood the full shape of what they are dealing with. This was not about Lucien. This was never about Lucien. Lucien was simply the instrument through which they had arrived at this. A condemned human healer who could be executed without consequence, and a king who would either save an innocent woman and watch his people starve, or execute her and save 10,000 lives. An impossible choice, designed by someone who understood exactly how impossible it was. Kaylor looked at me. I have 12 hours to decide. I looked at him directly. Then feed your people, I said. He was very still. I have survived worse than a king's silence before. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they carried something I had not seen in them before. Not grief, not guilt. Something quieter and considerably more resolute. I am not going to execute you, he said. I looked at him. You heard what I said. I heard you tell me to let you die, he said. That is not the same as the right thing to do. He looked at the door. I have 12 hours. I am going to use them. He left. I sat in the dungeon alone, not certain what he would find in 12 hours, not certain what could be found, but understanding for the first time that the man who had placed the seal on the table was not the same man who had just walked out of this dungeon. Something had shifted. Not enough. Not yet. But it was there. By sunrise, every road leading to Blackstone Palace was filled, not with merchants, not with nobles, with wolves, thousands of them. The crowd that had gathered was not simply angry, it was certain. Certainty was always more dangerous than anger. I was led from the dungeon in iron chains. The morning air was cold enough to sting my lungs. People shouted as soon as they saw me. Traitor! Human witch! She tried to kill the prince. I ignored them, not from courage, from the focus of someone who understood that the next hour would determine everything. The Alpha King sat upon the judgment throne. Queen Ceres sat beside him. She was not dressed in white. She was dressed in grey, the colour of someone who had spent the night not sleeping. The High Elder stepped forward. Elder Carveth, 70 years old, white-robed, the voice of tradition and divine authority in Blackstone Territory for 3 decades. Valen Ashwood, you stand accused of poisoning Prince Lucien, conspiring with unknown enemies, and attempting to murder the future Alpha. How do you plead? Innocent. My voice echoed across the square. Some laughed, others booed. The High Elder raised his staff. The prosecution may begin. Physician Draveth stepped forward first. He spoke with the measured authority of 20 years of royal service. He described my methods as unorthodox, my presence as suspicious, my access to the prince as unmonitored. He presented the vial found beside my medicine chest. The crowd responded exactly as he intended. One witness after another followed, prepared, rehearsed, each one adding another stone to the wall being built around me. Captain Ronan questioned each witness. Their stories shifted under pressure. Small contradictions, different times, different places. Enough to create doubt, not enough to change the crowd. Then came my turn. The High Elder looked at me. What do you say in your defense? I lifted my chained hands. I saved the prince twice. If I wished him dead, I had more opportunities than anyone. No assassin risks their own life to save the person they intend to kill. Captain Ronan nodded. Several nobles exchanged uneasy glances. The certainty in the crowd began to crack. The High Elder looked toward the king. "Your Majesty, it is time." Kalor closed his eyes. When he opened them, they carried the expression of a man who had spent 11 hours and 40 minutes refusing the easier answer, and had arrived at this moment with nothing left to rely on except the truth. "Valen Ashwood, for the attempted murder of the Crown Prince you are sentenced." He stopped, not because of a voice from the crowd, not because of Lucian, because a figure had stepped out of formation. One of the palace guards, young, 20 years old at most, the same one who had avoided my eyes in the dungeon, the one who had muttered, "You should have run." He stepped forward, one step. Out of the line where he had been standing, his captain immediately moved toward him. Back in formation. The young guard did not move. He looked at the crowd, then at the king, then at me. Then he said the thing that nobody in that square had been prepared for. 3 years ago, I was injured in Graypine Forest, he said. My wolf had been attacked by rogues. I could not make it back to the palace before nightfall. I found a cottage. The square was completely silent. She opened the door. She did not ask who I was. She did not ask if I was wolf or human, or rogue or noble. She simply looked at the wound and said, "I am going to need more frost moss." A sound moved through the crowd. Not a cheer, something quieter. She healed my wolf through the night. She gave me food before I left. She refused payment. He looked at the king directly. "I know what this woman is. I have known since I was assigned to escort her from the dungeon, and I cannot stand in this line and watch her die for something she did not do." Silence. His captain's hand was on his arm. "Stand down." The young guard did not move. Then behind him, another guard stepped forward. Then a servant from the eastern corridor. Then a merchant who had travelled 3 days from the outer settlements. Then 2 more guards. Then a woman from the palace kitchens who had once brought her child to the cottage at the forest edge, when palace physicians had said nothing more could be done. One by one. Not a revolution. Simply people who had been quietly healed over the years, arriving at the same moment and making the same choice. Standing. Because someone who had never asked anything of them needed someone to stand. Lucian arrived into a square that was already beginning to fracture. He ran in, still wearing his nightclothes, still barefoot. He threw himself in front of me. "You cannot." The crowd gasped. The king stood. "Lucian." The boy spread his little arms. "If you kill her, you will have to kill me too." Tears streamed down his face. "She saved me, twice. I saw everything." Then quietly he said the thing that settled the square completely. "You promised to protect me, and she protected me instead." Then he looked up, not at the High Elder, at Physician Draveth. "The man in the forest wore a black cloak," Lucian said. "He smelled like flowers, black flowers." He pointed. "He smelled like the physician's cabinet." Every eye turned toward Draveth. He had been present at every poisoning. He had been positioned to administer the slow poison, undetected for 3 weeks. He had been the one to present the vial found beside my medicine chest. His expression did not change. That was what told me everything. An innocent man would have reacted. Then Lucian pointed again. Higher. At the man standing beside Draveth. The High Elder. "He was there too," Lucian said quietly. "He came to the forest. He talked to the man in the black cloak. I hid behind a tree, but he smelled the same black flowers. The High Elder's composure finally moved, not dramatically, simply the subtle shift of someone who has understood that the exit they had always planned for has been closed. "Children imagine things under stress," he said smoothly. "The prince has been through considerable trauma." Captain Ronan was already moving. "Seal the palace gates." Within the hour, the truth began arriving. Not dramatically, piece by piece. The way truth always arrived when someone had spent considerable effort hiding it. Captain Ronan searched both the High Elder's chambers and Physician Dravith's private rooms simultaneously. What he found was not hidden. It was simply filed, in the orderly, systematic way of men who had been doing this for so long that they had stopped fearing discovery. A ledger in the Elder's chambers. 30 years of entries, payments, names, dates, 4 separate succession crises in Blackstone Territory across 3 decades, each one engineered, each one designed to weaken the Alpha bloodline and increase dependency on the noble house that funded the Elder's position. In Dravith's rooms, detailed records of the Moonshade administration, dosage, timing, the method of concealment in the prince's drinking vessel, the name of the rider who had followed Lucian into Graypine Forest, and a second set of payment records from the same trading house that appeared in the Elder's ledger, the Carvith family, the Elder's own blood. 30 years of conspiracy, 2 men at the center of it. One who provided the divine authority that made decisions unquestionable. One who provided the medical access that made poisoning undetectable. Captain Ronan brought both ledgers to the square. He read them aloud. Every entry, every payment, every name. The crowd that had been shouting for my execution fell silent page by page. Then Queen Ceres stood. The square watched her, waiting. She walked to the center of the square. She looked at the High Elder, then at Physician Dravith, then at her husband, then at me. "I received a letter," she said quietly. The square was very still. 6 months ago, from the Elder, it said that the prince's health was fragile and that outside interference from human healers posed a risk to the kingdom. It said that if I wanted to secure Lucian's future, I needed to act carefully when the time came. She closed her eyes. "I did not plant the poison. I did not arrange the forest attack. But when Lucian fell ill and a human healer arrived, and my son reached for her instead of me, She stopped. Her voice had lost its steadiness. "I wanted it to be her," she said, "because if it was her, I did not have to look at my son turning towards someone else. I did not have to understand what that meant about the years I had spent in this palace, trying to be everything a Luna was supposed to be." She looked at me directly. "I spent 20 years becoming the perfect Luna," she said. "Then one human walked into this palace, and my son loved her more in 3 days than he had ever looked at me." The square was absolutely silent. I was not strong enough to be glad for him. Her voice broke on the last word. "I am sorry." 2 words. Simple, genuine, the kind of words that arrive too late and know it. She did not reach for my forgiveness. She did not ask for it. She simply said the true thing and sat back down. Captain Ronan stepped forward. "Elder Carvith, Physician Dravith, you are under arrest for 30 years of conspiracy against the Blackstone bloodline." Neither man resisted. The elder looked at the assembled crowd with the expression of someone who had underestimated something and knew it. That something was a human healer who had walked into a palace and refused to leave quietly. No one moved. The High Elder and Physician Draveth stood in chains. Queen Ceres sat very still on the throne platform. Thousands of wolves stood in absolute silence. For the first time, they looked at me, not as a human, not as a traitor, simply as the woman they had almost executed. The young guard was still standing one step out of formation. His captain had stopped trying to move him. Captain Ronan slowly walked toward me. Without saying a word, he drew the dagger from his belt. He knelt, not before me, before justice. He cut through the iron chains around my wrists. The shackles fell onto the stone with a heavy clang. No one applauded. No one celebrated. The sound of those chains hitting the ground was louder than any cheer. Alpha King Kalor descended from the throne. Every step seemed to weigh more than the last. He stopped a few feet away. For a long moment he could not meet my eyes. When he finally did, the confidence every alpha carried was gone. Only regret remained. "I failed you," his voice carried across the silent square. "I failed my son. I failed my kingdom. I believed lies because they were easier than asking harder questions. I allowed fear to speak louder than evidence." He paused. "And I placed a seal of royal protection in your hands and removed it publicly when it cost me something." The square was absolutely still. "That is not the kind of king Lucian deserves." He reached into his coat. He placed the royal protection seal in my hands, not as a gesture, as an acknowledgement of what removing it had meant. Then he looked at the young guard, still standing one step out of formation. "What is your name?" "Eden, Your Majesty." "Eden." Kalor looked at him. "You will be promoted to captain of the Northern Gate by the end of this week." Eden blinked. "Your Majesty, I did not step forward for a promotion." "I know," Kalor said. "That is precisely why you are receiving one." Prince Lucian slipped from Captain Ronan's side. He ran straight toward me. He wrapped both arms around my waist. "I knew you did not do it." I knelt and brushed the tears from his face. "You never stopped believing me." He nodded. "I knew." "How?" "Because bad people do not smile when they are hurt." "You smiled at me when the arrow hit you." I laughed softly through my tears. "Children, they noticed the things adults forgot to see." The High Elder and Physician Draveth faced the Territorial Council the following week. 30 years of evidence presented. 30 years of accountability delivered. Both were stripped of every title, every appointment, every access to the authority they had spent 3 decades accumulating, and sentenced to the outer settlements. Removed from the center, there was nothing left. Queen Ceres was not charged. Not because her involvement was without consequence, because Kalor made a different judgment. He sat with her for 3 days before announcing it. What was said between them remained private. What came after was not. She stepped down from the lunar position formally. She was given a house in the eastern settlements. Small, quiet, her own. The last I heard, she had started a small garden. I did not know what she grew, but I thought of her sometimes, not with anger, with the understanding of someone who had seen what 20 years of performing love for a kingdom that measured you by its standards had done to a person. That was not forgiveness. It was simply the truth of what I had seen. 3 days later, I packed my medicine chest, the same one that had nearly become my coffin. Prince Lucian refused to leave my side. "You have to stay." "I cannot." "Why?" I smiled. "Because healing belongs everywhere, not only in palaces." He looked at the little wooden wolf he had carved for me. "I will miss you. I will miss you too." He reached into his pocket. I made something else. It was another carving, a tiny cottage, crooked, uneven, perfect. "So you will not forget home." I hugged him tightly. I never could. The Alpha King offered me gold, land, a noble title, even a permanent place beside the royal family. I refused every one. My life was never meant to belong inside walls. He understood. At last. Instead, he granted me something far greater. An old monastery at the edge of Graypine Forest, abandoned for decades. There, he said, build whatever you believe the kingdom needs. So I did. Within a year, wolves and humans stood in the same waiting room. Children played together. Rogues sat beside nobles. No one asked about bloodlines. Only injuries. Only hope. They called it the House of Mercy. People traveled from kingdoms hundreds of miles away, not because I possessed magic, because they finally believed compassion could exist without conditions. In the second year, I found something in the old monastery walls, hidden behind a loose stone in the eastern corridor, a bundle of documents, wrapped in cloth, so carefully preserved that the paper inside had survived decades without damage. The handwriting on the first page stopped me completely. I recognized it immediately. My grandmother's. She had been in this monastery many times. The documents were her records. 30 years of observation. The same network Captain Ronan had found in the elders' chambers. Except my grandmother's version was older. The first entry dated 30 years before the night I walked into Blackstone Palace with my medicine chest. She had known. She had been investigating the Carveth conspiracy for 30 years. She had moved to the cottage at the edge of Graypine Forest, not randomly, because it sat at the intersection of the 3 territories the Elders' network moved through. She had positioned herself there deliberately, to watch, to gather evidence, to wait for the moment when the truth could be delivered to someone who would know what to do with it. She had died before the moment arrived, and left the cottage to the granddaughter she had taught everything to. The forest always tells the truth, she used to say. People do not. The document at the bottom of the bundle was the last thing she had written. A single line. The forest always tells the truth. I hoped you were listening. I set the documents down. I sat in the monastery corridor for a long time, understanding for the first time that I had not been in Graypine Forest by accident. I had been placed there by a woman who had trusted me with something she could not finish herself. Then I went back to work, because that was what she had taught me. The answer to everything that had been done in darkness was not rage. It was simply more light, steadily, consistently, without waiting for acknowledgement. Simply more light. Years passed. Lucien became a man, then an alpha. On the day of his coronation, he stood before every pack in the kingdom. His first royal decree surprised everyone. No healer, human or wolf, shall ever again be judged by their blood. They will be judged only by the lives they save. The crowd erupted, not because the decree was popular, because it was right. One spring afternoon, several years after the coronation, I was working in the House of Mercy garden when I heard footsteps on the path. I knew them before I saw him. Alpha Lucien. He was taller than his father now, broader, carrying the particular weight of someone who had learned what governing cost and had chosen to carry it honestly. He was holding something in his hand, the small wooden wolf, the crooked one with one ear too big and a tail that leaned to one side. He placed it on the windowsill of the cottage. I watched him do it. You kept it, I said. All these years. He looked at it for a moment. You once told me people leave choices behind in the snow. I looked at him. And what did I leave? He looked at the House of Mercy, at the wolves and humans in the same waiting room. at the children playing in the garden, at the kingdom his mother's fear had nearly destroyed, and his own first decree had begun to repair. A kingdom that remembers compassion before fear, he said. Then he picked up the wooden wolf and placed it back in my hands. I think you should keep this, he said. You earned it more than I did. I looked at the small crooked carving, at the too big ear and the leaning tail, at the thing a 7-year-old boy had made with the first strength returning to his hands after 3 days between living and dying. Then I looked at the man he had become. And I smiled, not because the story had ended well, because it had simply continued, the way good things did, one honest choice at a time. Take a moment with that. Then tell me which moment got you. The little prince refusing to leave her side, the seal removed publicly, the thing standing between her and the crowd, the moment of doubt in the dungeon, the wooden wolf in her hands answering it. 10,000 wolves will starve. Feed your people. I have survived worse than a king's silence. He spent 11 hours and 40 minutes refusing to take the easier answer. Lucian saying, if you kill her, you will have to kill me too. The young guard stepping one step out of formation. I was in Graypine Forest 3 years ago. She did not ask who I was. She simply healed. Then 2 more guards, then a servant, then a merchant, then a woman from the kitchens. Simply people who had been quietly healed, arriving at the same moment and making the same choice. I spent 20 years becoming the perfect Luna. Then one human walked into this palace, and my son loved her more in 3 days than he had ever looked at me. The ledger, 30 years, 4 succession crises, the same name. The shackles cut from her wrists. Eden, you did not step forward for a promotion. I know, that is precisely why you are receiving one. The seal placed back in her hands. No healer shall ever again be judged by their blood. The documents behind the monastery wall. My grandmother's handwriting. The forest always tells the truth. I hoped you were listening. You once told me people leave choices behind in the snow. What did I leave? A kingdom that remembers compassion before fear. He placed the wooden wolf back in her hands. You earned it more than I did. Tell me which one. I read every single one. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story is already waiting. Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, the strongest hearts are not the ones that never break. They are the ones that keep choosing compassion after they have been broken. MoonNoir.